mature and thoughtful child, firm political views.
Well, I think right from the beginning, he cared passionately about social justice. I mean, he grew up in the North Wales, very clear class distinctions, and also, I think, quite clear ethnic distinctions. There was an Anglo-Welsh upper class, and they owned a great deal of the land in those days, and I think Lloyd George was very conscious of that, as many Welsh people were.
The divisions that ran right through Wales during Lloyd George's childhood were very deep indeed, and they were just as evident in Llanystumdwy as they were elsewhere. Most of the people who lived in the village were relatively poor, but a small minority, the landed gentry of the area, were prosperous individuals who differed from the ordinary villagers in many important ways. For a start, they spoke English instead of Welsh. They were also Anglicans, members of the Church of England, who trooped along every Sunday to Llanystumdwy's parish church, whereas the other villagers were all chapel-goers, or nonconformists, as we should really call them. The nonconformist majority felt, with some justification, that they were oppressed by the Anglican elite. And the social tension this created in the village had a big effect on Lloyd George. We know this because of a key episode in his early life. It took place at Llanystumdwy's tiny village school, when Lloyd George was a pupil here, around the year 1873. He was just 10 years old at the time, but the incident proves he had a much greater sense of social justice than we'd normally expect of a child. Just like today, most of the children who attended the school back then were Welsh speakers. Unlike today, for the most part, they were devout nonconformists too. And yet, because the school was run by the Church of England, lessons were conducted in English, and the Anglican faith was the order of the day. The situation was hardly acceptable, and Lloyd George became determined to do something. What he did was dramatised later on in a fascinating silent movie, which is held today at the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth. I've always wanted to see the film, so this is my chance. The film was made in 1918, when Lloyd George was at the height of his fame and power, but it was never released at the time. We don't know precisely why, but Lloyd George might have been reluctant to appear too power-crazy and big-headed. The film was lost for many years and then found quite recently. It's been carefully restored by library staff. The film is undoubtedly well made, though it seems a little quaint today, but it does shed some fascinating light on Lloyd George's early life, especially that day at Llanystumdwy School when he made a stand. Once a year, Lloyd George and his fellow pupils had to put on a particular display of loyalty. They all had to recite the Anglican Catechism to a distinguished deputation which included a local vicar and the local squire. I think it's fair to say that Lloyd George despised this little ritual, and he was determined to disrupt it, which is what he did. On the day of the visit, Lloyd George took matters into his own hands and staged a bit of a revolt. The squire and the vicar, of course, were appalled, but the teacher seems to have realised that his young pupil might have had a point. We'd have to say that taking a stand like this at the age of 10 required a certain amount of courage. And this was just a sign of things to come.
He did have, from a very early age, this extraordinary sense of his own abilities and ambition and the confidence that he would succeed and get right to the top. He was never held back by any sense that he was storming citadels or having to fight prejudice. He knew he was bloody good and he was going to get to the top, and he didn't see any obstacles that would stop him.